Guys, for today's lunch talk, I want to touch really quickly on cloud computing. I spent 4 days doing AWS training last week, so if you have any question about AWS, you can ask that as well. So this will just be a brief introduction to cloud computing, what it is, what are the benefits, when to use it, when not to use it, and we should do a short mini demo how to host your own website using Jekyll and S3. So obviously the first question is, what is the cloud? So does anyone want to take a shot at what the difference is between cloud computing and traditional computing?
Somebody else's computer.
It's somebody else's? It can be. It can also be your own computers.
Computers together, right?
That is true. It's true.
Yeah.
But you can also have networks in traditional hosting.
But cloud is more of a service rather than actual hardware.
Cloud is a service, yes, but traditional hosting can also be a service. But you're on the right track.
More than one.
Can be, but not necessarily. So the difference between cloud computing and traditional hosting is that it's computing as a utility service. So I think the best analogy to understand this is the power grid. So generating electricity is extremely complex, yet using electricity extremely simple. You just plug in your power socket and then it works. And if you want more electricity, you just plug in another power socket and it works. And it's always available. And hidden in the background, you have thousands and thousands of experts managing all this and making sure that it gets delivered to you. And this is also how cloud computing works, which means that it's instantly scalable. So say that you run your own power plant. If you want more power, then your power plant can supply. You need to build another power plant, and it's going to take a couple of years. And similarly, if you run your own servers, if you want to extend your capacity, you need more servers, which is going to take at least a couple of weeks to provision. Whereas in the cloud, you can get them within minutes. It's always available. On AWS, some things you need to architect to be highly available, but most of their services have SLAs of 5 nines default. And maybe most importantly, because it's a utility service, you pay only for what you use. Which is a quite powerful concept, because if you have a sudden traffic spike, you can scale out your computing for a couple hours, and then you can scale it in again, and you pay only for those hours. Whereas if you have a service that has very rare spikes yourself, you need to have that computing available all the time. So if you take things like paying your taxes, the tax authorities service, it will get bombarded on the last day that you can declare your taxes. So if they were to not use cloud computing, they would need enough computing power all year round to accommodate that spike that only happens on one day. Whereas in the cloud, you can say, okay, on this day, we'll take a couple minutes, and then we stop paying for it. On AWS, they even have something called spot pricing, which means that any computing power that is not used at the moment, people can bid for it. So it's like a real-time bidding market, which means if you do things that are not mission critical and not up all the time, so you're running like data analytics or rendering or whatever, you can just use the spot pricing and get very cheap compute for it. Okay, so I set up a very, very small demo for how you can run your own website in the cloud using AWS. Has everyone used S3? So S3 is basically cloud file hosting. So you create a bucket, and then you can put objects in it. It's an object store. It doesn't care what objects it is. You can just put stuff in there. And you pay for the space you use. And the bucket is automatically replicated all over the region where you store it, so you will never lose your data, essentially. But what you can also do is you can host static websites through S3. And you can connect S3 to CloudFront, which is Amazon's CDN. So you can distribute it across the world and have it served very, very fast. So, everyone heard about Jekyll, or? So Jekyll is basically a gem that you can use to generate static websites. So you have a bunch of templates for Jekyll. You can have things like CoffeeScript or whatever asset pipeline you want. You just run Jekyll and it will compile it down into a static website for you. So I'm going to try to use this with S3 to see if we can host a static website. So I'm going to go into my console here. Maybe it's bigger text. All right. So I already installed Jekyll. I have some issue with the permissions that I didn't manage to figure out, so I have to sudo it. But so I'm going to create a project called test site. Okay, it created the folder for me. It has a bunch of stuff in there. So this is the default Jekyll theme and some dummy data. So if you want to edit this on your computer, you can do I have to sudo that as well. Okay, so it's generated my static site and it's hosting a server on my local host. Let's go in there and see what it looks like. Oh, that's what's wrong. Okay, so the default site is very primitive. It looks like this. It has some posts and stuff in it. So how do we get this on to S3? Well, first I'm going to go to S3 and I'm going to set up a new bucket. So this one I created beforehand because it takes like 15 minutes for CloudFront to create your distribution. So we're going to use this one for showing the results then. But we'll create my bucket here. I will select region US standard now because Jekyll uses that by default. Okay. So this is what an S3 bucket looks like. So what you can do is you can, if you want to, you can manually upload stuff, create folders, or you can use the Amazon SDK, which is basically what they're using in the Jekyll gem that I'm going to use. But I'm also going to set up a CloudFront distribution. So just click Create Distribution. I want it to be a web. So don't set up your own domain name using whatever DNS service you like. Amazon has a DNS server called Route 53 if it's don't use the Amazon stack. But for now, I'm just going to use the S3 domain name. I'll go with all the default settings. Create my distribution. So you see it's in progress there. It's going to take about 15 minutes for it to build. There's also a last thing you need to do. You need to go into IAM, which is the access control. I created a group here called S3 group that has full access to S3. And I've created a user that is a member of that group. You don't really want to use the root account that you get when you sign up for AWS because it's for security reasons. Ideally, you want to set up your IAM accounts, and then you want to just remove access for the root account. So let's go back to the S3 bucket. Okay, so this was how you serve a local server with Jekyll. If you want to create the static assets to serve on your website, you do Jekyll build. Okay, you can see it created a folder called site. And here is everything we're going to need for our website. So now I'm going to use a gem called Jekyll S3, which basically connects the two. It uses the Amazon SDK to upload your stuff to your bucket. I think it's installed. Hope it's installed. Okay, so that generated a configuration file. So let's see what that looks like. Here you basically need to put your credentials that you got for your IAM user. And a word of warning, the credentials are generated once. If you don't download them, they are lost. So you need to recreate the user because they don't store any credentials in AWS. Oh yeah, this was an issue. I don't really know. It creates some very strange permissions on that file. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy my I think I put the stuff in there. Lose it inside. Okay, so we copied all the stuff. So to get this to S3, I just do run Jekyll S3 in the folder. Yeah, so Jekyll S3, it was actually forked into a new project, so which you can use to deploy stuff from. I think the new one is like website S3 or something, so you can use it to deploy for other things as well, other static generators. And now, hopefully, in our yeah, I didn't change it right. Redo that. Right, hopefully there's some stuff in here. Okay, you can see our static website assets got loaded into here. So let's see what it looks like. So you can see it's still in progress. It takes quite a while for this. Let's try this one. Now, because I don't own domain name, I have to use this CloudFront domain, which is not that pretty, but you can, of course, connect it to your own thing. And my static website is online in the cloud.
You say that like there's a version or something, like a level of version control of this?
Sorry?
Could you set it up such that there's a level of version control of this?
On S3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so S3 supports versioning. So if you enable it for your bucket, it will save all your previous versions. I don't know if there is an easy way to like roll back to an earlier version or not using like the gem, but it's definitely versioning is available. Right. So how much does our website cost? The one I just deployed. It's not free because it's pay for what you use. But for the storage, S3 charges $3 per gigabyte. So I don't know what our static website is, maybe 200 kilobytes or something. So yeah, and then you pay a little bit for the delivery through CloudFront for the traffic, and the price is different depending on which region you use. Because, you only pay for what you use, and the price is different. But the website is gonna run at less than $1 per month. So there might be use cases where you don't want to use something like AWS. So if you have a website with very predictable traffic and you never foresee the need to scale, then it might be cheaper to run it on another hosting service. But you might lose the things like availability. You will certainly lose the ability to scale quickly. So basically, what adds to the price on Amazon is compute. So the EC2, if you want a server, that is definitely what adds to your costs. But you can also deploy dynamic content using CloudFront, which means that if you host your API on EC2, when CloudFront sees that, okay, this is a dynamic page, I need to get the stuff from the origin, it won't go through the internet, it will go through CloudFront's internally optimized network, so your latency is going to be just 1 or 2 milliseconds usually. Benefit if you want good response times. I mean, it's very possible to do an entire front-end website using JavaScript to talk to the API that you have in the backend, which can be anything. And you just host everything, including the index file through CloudFront. And that's all. So now, if there are any questions about this or S3 or AWS in general, you can ask it.
So I was around just now when you were deploying to the S3 Kafka. Is it the same process when you're doing it on a full Rails application, or no? That one requires you to actually SSH it. And because I remember you guys were talking about it in the past, where if you use S3, it was actually an actual server, GUI and everything.
So if you want the S3 can only do it can only host the static content.
This S3.
EC2?
Yeah, EC2.
So ideally, you don't want to SSH in. You want to automate as much as you can. So what you can do in AWS is you can create a server image, and then you can add something called user data, which is where you put your bootstrap script. So either you build an image that has Rails installed already, or you build a clean image and you create a script to install Rails, pull your repo and host or whatever. So ideally, you want one exercise you can do is just disable SSH on all your servers, and then you will see how much stuff you still need to automate. And this allows you to do stuff like auto-scaling groups, which means you can have a load balancer that is provided by AWS. Then you can have a number of EC2 instances that get traffic balanced between them. And for auto-scaling to work, it has to be automatic, because it needs to, the system creates the server and does the health check and everything without any manual intervention.
It's not when you hosted the website. Is it certain use Kafka?
You can host it using just the S3 bucket.
But your URL will be
Yeah. So I think performance will be similar in the region that you are. So if you're in Singapore and you want only have Singaporean traffic, you can host it in a Singapore bucket, and it will be pretty fast. It can be more expensive though to host it from S3, because the price for bandwidth is CloudFront. So it depends on, if people are accessing the file often, then it's cheaper to do it in CloudFront, because it only has to fetch it from the origin once, and then they will just hit the edge location, and you will only pay per request, which is I think 1 cent per 10,000 requests.
How much would we expect to pay once we start introducing like EC2 instances?
So the smallest instance, micro instance, is about $17 per month if you run it 24/7.
But the first is free.
Yeah, they also have the free tier, which is for 1 year you can use all the services for free up to a certain use limit, and it includes 1 micro instance. So if you want to play around with AWS and like test out all the services and like build your own stuff, then you can sign up for that. You have to, when you sign up for AWS, you have to input a credit card. So.
Any more questions?
So I noticed when you did the Jekyll server, right? Is that serving a dynamically generated web page?
Yes, and you can also do Jekyll serve, and then you pass in the flag watch, which means it will auto detect any changes you do to the templates and update. So it's basically just a convenience thing for working with your templates before you build them. I don't think you should use that as like a front end for anything.
Yeah.
So the difference between Heroku is, of course, that Amazon is infrastructure as a service. Everything that Amazon has, they have no idea what's going on in your operating system or in your application layers. That is just like a black box to them. Whereas in Heroku, you get basically an application container. So it's a trade-off. Heroku, extreme convenience, but not a very big room to scale in, and not a lot of flexibility if you want, if you need another architecture than just like one server that does stuff. So you could say that Heroku is basically traditional hosting built on top of cloud hosting.
Is it hard to shift from, say, at the start you go from Heroku first, then maybe in the first 2 years business slow, but then suddenly year 2 it shot up really quickly and then you needed to scale to Amazon. So is it easy to transfer over?
It's quite easy, yes.
I think that's what we did for Telecom. That's what
Yeah.
happened, right? I think because of the timeout, but it's the same effect, right? You go from Heroku and then you move everything, you migrate it over to AWS.
What involved in the migration?
By the way, to IGY.
So
You said Heroku uses AWS,
yeah, Heroku uses AWS.
so it should be easy.
It's basically a matter of setting up a machine image, which you can choose from a lot of already finished ones, and like setting up your automated deployment or whatever. I think the issue you might run into is if you started to use a lot of add-ons in Heroku, it might be an issue.
These machine images, are they from Amazon's own repository or their open?
Both. So you have Amazon's own, all sorts of Linux and Windows. You can create your own, and there are also publicly available images.
So the add-ons, can you just install them manually on Amazon?
If they're available to install, yes.
If they're available. So what happens if they aren't?
Then you need to look at some other solution.
For example, you use SendGrid for emails that you use.
It's a gem.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a gem for it, then it's
You
possible.
can, as a service, I think.
Yeah, I think SendGrid does. But I'm not sure about the rest. I'm not sure how this is.
I think so far the regular ones that we're using in Heroku, the add-ons, as independent services, they're available for integrating with
Practically
the
working on similar.
Yeah, so basically what you're paying in AWS is the upfront DevOps works, where you set up all the automation. You need to worry about things like patching your operating system if any major exploits and stuff. You might need to set up Chef or Puppet, DevOps workflows
I
and
know
things
there's a
like that.
cost of Coursera teachers. So your deployment environment and your development environment.
BTS.
Yes, yes. So actually, Amazon also, by default, it's now a private cloud. So when you create the first thing you do is, when you set up instances, is you create your virtual private cloud, which means that your networking is going to be siloed. Which also means that you need to pick an IP address range that is big enough to be able to have your architecture in it. And inside there, you can set things up like private subnets and basically everything you could do in your cloud that is hosted in your own data center. All right, let's finish there and have some lunch.
Yay.
There's the orange bit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.